There was a time when Halo wasn't just another video game. It was the video game. If you owned an Xbox in the early 2000s, chances are Halo wasn't sitting on your shelf. It practically lived inside your console. This wasn't simply a successful franchise. It became the reason millions of people bought an Xbox in the first place. Halo shaped an entire generation of gamers. Before online multiplayer became the standard, Halo was bringing people together in ways that feel almost impossible to recreate today. Friends dragging bulky CRT televisions into the same room, running Ethernet cables through hallways, spending entire weekends battling each other until sunrise. It wasn't just about winning. Halo became a social event. But Halo's impact went far beyond LAN parties. Combat Evolved changed how first-person shooters worked on consoles. Their two-weapon system, rechargeable shields, smart enemy AI, massive open-ended levels, even the controller layout that so many shooters still use today owes something to Halo. And then there was Master Chief, a protagonist who barely spoke, yet somehow became one of the most recognizable characters in gaming history. Bungie understood something that many developers still struggle with today. Sometimes saying less makes a character feel even larger than life. Every mission reinforced one idea: humanity was losing. You weren't some superhero flying around saving the galaxy with flashy powers. You were humanity's last chance. Every Marine who looked at Chief saw hope. Every victory felt earned. Every soundtrack made the battlefield legendary. Then came Halo 2. Then Halo 3, and somehow Halo became even bigger. Midnight launches, record-breaking sales, one of the largest online communities gaming had ever seen. Xbox Live and Halo became almost inseparable, but no franchise stays on top forever. Bungie eventually moved on. Microsoft still owned Halo, but the people who built its identity were gone. A new studio inherited one of the most important franchises in gaming history, and with it came one impossible question: how do you continue a series that already changed gaming forever? Unfortunately, that question has haunted Halo for over a decade, and by the time Halo Studios announced a remake of Combat Evolved, many fans had already stopped believing Halo could ever return to what made it special. When Bungie left Halo after Reach, it wasn't just another developer handing over a franchise. It was the studio that created Halo handing its greatest creation to someone else. Microsoft still owns the IP. Master Chief, the Halo rings, the Covenant, the music, the universe, all of it remained. But the people who originally brought that universe to life were largely gone. In 2012, Halo entered a new era. 343 Industries, now known as Halo Studios, was tasked with carrying one of gaming's most iconic franchise into the future. It wasn't an easy job. Every sequel would be compared against Halo Combat Evolved, Halo 2, Halo 3, games that many still consider among the greatest ever made. Halo 4 wasn't a disaster. In fact, critics generally reviewed it well. The graphics were impressive, the campaign had emotional moments, but for many players it was a solid first attempt. But something had changed. The enemies felt different, the art style shifted, the multiplayer leaned towards trends that were dominating shooters at the time, and instead of building on a simple mystery of the original trilogy, Halo's story became increasingly tied to expanded lore that many casual players had never experienced. None of these decisions were catastrophic on their own, but together they marked the beginning of a divide. For some players, Halo was evolving. For others, it was slowly becoming something they didn't recognize. Then came Halo 5, and that's when the cracks became impossible to ignore. The marketing promised the one thing: a hunt for Master Chief. Conflict between two Spartans, a story that would reshape the Halo universe. But the final campaign delivered something very different. Master Chief appeared far less than many expected. Much of the story revolved around Spartan Locke, and one of Halo's most beloved character, Cortana, returned in a way that divided fans almost immediately. The criticism wasn't just about one plot twist, it was about trust. More and more players began asking the same question: did the people making Halo still understand what made Halo? Halo Infinite was supposed to answer that question. In many ways, it did. The gameplay was excellent. Master Chief once again felt like the hero. Critics praised the gameplay loop. Many fans believed Halo had finally found its footing again, but the launch told a different story. Missing features, delayed co-op, delayed Forge, live service content arriving slower than expected, seasons stretching on for months. Once again, the momentum disappeared, and that's what makes Halo's story so fascinating. None of these games completely failed. In fact, each one had something fans genuinely loved. Halo 4's campaign, Halo 5's multiplayer, Infinite's gameplay. The problem was consistency. Every step forward seemed to come with another step back. Over the course of more than a decade, something quietly disappeared. Confidence. Players stopped assuming the next Halo would be great. Every announcement was met with cautious optimism instead of excitement. Every trailer came with skepticism. Every promise was followed by "we'll see." Which brings us to 2026. Halo Studios had the opportunity to win everyone back. They weren't making a brand new story. They weren't renovating multiplayer. They were remaking the game that started everything. If there was ever a safe bet, this was it. Imagine being handed the blueprint to one of the greatest first-person shooters ever made. The story was already written, the levels were already legendary, the soundtrack was already iconic, the characters had already become gaming legends. All you had to do was modernize it. That's exactly what Halo Studios set out to do with Campaign Evolved. On paper, it sounded almost impossible to mess up. A full remake of Combat Evolved built using modern technology, new visuals, updated gameplay, and the return of the game that started Xbox's biggest franchise. After years of mixed releases, this was supposed to be Halo's redemption story. Instead, it became one of its most divisive. Here's the challenge with remaking a classic. You're not mixing a broken game. You're touching one that millions of people already consider nearly perfect. Every change is going to be examined. Every new cutscene, every line of dialogue, every visual redesign. Because when fans love something for over 20 years, they're going to notice everything. To be fair, Campaign Evolved does a lot right. Some environments look absolutely stunning. Locations like Silent Cartographer feel massive in ways the original hardware could never achieve. Modern lighting gives certain missions a completely new atmosphere. Gameplay remains unmistakably Halo. The sandbox is still fun, the AI is still engaging, and at its core, Combat Evolved is still one of the greatest shooters ever made. Ironically, that's also where the remake's biggest problem begins. Because whenever the remake stopped recreating Halo and started rewriting it, that's where many fans began checking out. Some cutscenes were completely reworked. Certain moments that relied on subtlety became much more cinematic. New dialogue was added, extra story sequences appeared, new missions expanded parts of the campaign. For some players, these additions helped modernize a 25-year-old game. For others, they interrupted what never needed fixing in the first place. One of the biggest debates wasn't about graphics, it was about tone. The original Combat Evolved had a sense of mystery. The Halo ring felt ancient, the Flood was terrifying because you knew almost nothing about it. Even Master Chief said very little. The game trusted the player to experience the story for themselves. Critics of the remake argue that some of those quieter moments have been replaced with heavier exposition and more cinematic storytelling, making the experience feel less mysterious than the original. The remake also introduces additional missions and new characters that weren't part of Bungie's original campaign. These sections quickly became one of the community's biggest talking points. Supporters argue they expand the Halo universe and provide more context to events happening outside Master Chief's perspective. Critics see them differently. They argue these missions interrupt the pacing of Combat Evolved and shift attention away from the journey players originally came for. And this is where the conversation became much bigger than Campaign Evolved. The debate stopped being, is this remake good? And became, what should a remake actually be? Should it faithfully preserve one of gaming's greatest classics, or should developers reinterpret it for a new generation? There isn't a universally accepted answer. Halo Studios may have underestimated just how protective Halo fans still are of Combat Evolved. But even if every creative decision had been universally praised, there was still one problem Halo Studios could not escape. By the time Campaign Evolved released, many players have already moved on. Before Campaign Evolved was released, something felt different. The excitement wasn't there. Sure, people were talking about the game, but they weren't talking about it in the way they talked about Halo 2, Halo 3, or even Halo Infinite. Instead of asking, how good is this going to be, the conversation had already shifted to what are they going to change this time. And to be fair, not everyone hated Campaign Evolved. Plenty of players praised the updated visuals. Others enjoyed seeing classic locations rebuilt with modern technology. Some even appreciated the expanded story and additional missions. If you never played the original, Campaign Evolved can still be an enjoyable experience. But for long-time Halo fans, the reaction was much more complicated. One criticism kept appearing over and over again. Not the graphics are bad, not the gameplay is broken. Instead, it doesn't feel like Halo. That's an incredibly difficult criticism to respond to because it isn't about frame rates, resolutions, or visual fidelity. It's about something much harder to define: the tone, the atmosphere, the identity. New missions? Debate. Updated cutscenes? Debate. Redesigned environments? Debate. Additional dialogue? Debate. New characters? Debate. Even relatively small changes became controversial, not necessarily because they were bad, but because fans kept asking the same question: why change something that already worked? One discussion that spread quickly online centered around the remake's expanded cast and the inclusion of more female Marines and newly introduced characters. Some players argued these additions felt unnecessary and distracted from Bungie's original vision. Others saw them as perfectly reasonable updates for a modern remake, pointing out that Halo has always featured memorable female characters such as Cortana, Miranda, and Veronica Dare. In many ways, the debate wasn't really about gender. It was about philosophy. Every addition, no matter how small, raised the same underlying question: should a remake preserve history or reinterpret it? Expectations can be dangerous. The better the original, the harder the remake has to work. Combat Evolved isn't just another old shooter. It's one of the most influential games ever made. That means every single creative decision carries far more weight than it normally would. Social media only amplified the divide. Every screenshot became evidence, every cutscene became a comparison video, every creative decision became another argument. Supporters called critics blinded by nostalgia. Critics argued Halo Studios fundamentally misunderstood what made Combat Evolved special. Somewhere in the middle, many players simply wanted a remake that captured the feeling they remembered from 25 years ago. And that's probably the hardest audience to satisfy, because nostalgia isn't remembering a game, it's remembering where you were when you played it, the friends you played with, the excitement of discovering Halo for the first time. No remake, no matter how technically impressive, can ever completely recreate that. But nostalgia alone doesn't explain why Campaign Evolved struggled. To understand that, we have to look at something much bigger than one remake. We have to look at Halo itself. Looking at Campaign Evolved, it's easy to spend hours debating every individual change. The new missions, the altered cutscenes, the updated visuals, the rewritten dialogue. But I don't think any of those explain why this remake struggled to capture the excitement Halo once generated. Because the real problem started long before Campaign Evolved ever existed. Halo didn't lose players overnight, it lost them one release at a time. Halo 4 divided the community. Halo 5 divided it even further. Halo Infinite restored some hope, only to lose momentum through a difficult live service launch and missing features. Every release brought promises, every release brought improvements, but every release also gave players another reason to lose confidence. Eventually, skepticism replaced excitement. That's why Campaign Evolved faced an impossible challenge. It wasn't trying to convince people Combat Evolved was a masterpiece. Everyone already knew that. It had to convince people that Halo itself was worth believing in again. Those are two different things. Nostalgia might make someone watch a trailer. It might even convince them to reinstall Halo, but nostalgia doesn't rebuild trust. Then there was the value proposition. The obvious comparison wasn't another remake, it was the Master Chief Collection. Multiple Halo campaigns, multiplayer, years of content, all available for less or through Game Pass, which naturally led many players to ask, why should I pay premium price for one campaign I've already played? What's interesting is that many of the biggest debates surrounding Campaign Evolved started before players even finished the game. Discussions about redesigned cutscenes, added missions, new characters, changes to the tone. They dominated social media almost immediately. Whether those changes actually improved the experience became almost secondary. The remake wasn't being judged in isolation, it was carrying more than a decade of baggage. And maybe that's the saddest part, Combat Evolved is still an incredible game. Strip away all the debates, all the controversy, all the comparisons, and underneath it, they're still one of the greatest first-person shooters ever made. Which raises a difficult question, if people still love Combat Evolved, why don't they love modern Halo? I think the answer is surprisingly simple. Great franchises don't survive on history alone, they survive on trust. Trust that the next game will be worth your time. Trust that the developers understand what made the series special. Trust that when you hear the words "a new Halo is coming," you actually be excited. Campaign Evolved wasn't missing good graphics, it wasn't missing polished gameplay. It was missing something far more valuable. The confidence of the audience it was trying to win back. And until Halo earns the confidence again, even remaking one of the greatest games ever made might not be enough. Which leaves one final question: can Halo still be saved? Or has gaming already moved on? If you made it this far, you might think this video has been about everything Halo Studios has done wrong. But honestly, I don't think that's the real story. The real story is much sadder than that. Halo still has everything it needs to succeed. Master Chief is still one of gaming's most recognizable characters. The soundtrack is still legendary, the universe is still fascinating. Millions of people still remember where they were when they first stepped onto Halo. Very few franchises can say that. Gaming has changed, players have more choices than ever before. In 2001, Halo didn't have to compete with 20 live service shooters. It didn't have to fight for attention against battle royales, hero shooters, extraction shooters, or thousands of games releasing every year. Today, if you disappoint your audience, they don't wait for you to improve, they simply move on. And that's why I think Halo's story matters beyond just Halo, because we're seeing this happen across the entire industry. Legendary franchises built by one generation of developers eventually get handed to another. Sometimes those new teams create something incredible. Sometimes they spend years trying to reinvent what never needed reinventing. Every remake, every reboot, every sequel faces the exact same question. Are you preserving what made people fall in love with it or replacing it? I don't think Halo needs bigger explosions. I don't think it needs more complicated story. I don't think it needs to chase whatever trend is popular this year. What Halo needs is confidence in its own identity, confidence that being Halo is enough. I guess you guys have noticed that I say confidence a lot when it comes to developers, because that's honestly what they need. They need to be confident with what they're making. Campaign Evolved wasn't a terrible game. In fact, there are moments where it generally reminds you why Combat Evolved became legendary in the first place. But that's also what makes it frustrating, because every time you begin to feel that magic again, the remake reminds you it doesn't completely trust the original. It wants to improve it, expand it, reinterpret it. Whether those changes work or not is something every player will decide for themselves. The debate surrounding them proves one thing. Halo fans never wanted a different Combat Evolved. They wanted a reason to believe in Halo again. Maybe Halo will recover. Stranger things have happened. Franchises have come back from worse. Maybe Halo Studios eventually finds the formula. Maybe the next game reminds everyone why they fell in love with the series 25 years ago. Because despite everything we've talked about today, Halo deserves to succeed. Not because it's owned by Microsoft, not because it's one of gaming's biggest names, but because Halo helped shape this industry. It inspired countless developers. It created unforgettable memories for millions of players, and very few games ever earned that kind of legacy. Maybe that's why Campaign Evolved feels so disappointing to so many people. It wasn't just another remake, it was supposed to remind us why Halo mattered. Instead, it reminded us just how difficult it is to recreate lightning in a bottle. But anyway guys, put your thoughts down below in the comments. If you guys did enjoy, you know what to do. Drop a like, subscribe to my channel, it really helps me out a lot, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Let's crank out and move out.